Hi, I'm your host Sam Fish, and you're listening to The Fishbowl. Today's guest is Michael Miner. Michael is most known for co writing the original 1987 Robocop, as well as co writing the 1997 sci fi action film Starship Troopers. Today we'll be talking with Michael a little bit about those films and some other projects. Michael Miner on The Fishbowl, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Sam.
Great to have you on. That definitely fixed up the little connection issue. First off, let me just say, I said this to Ed on Saturday, but the two of you as screenwriters and me being a screenwriting senior this year has really influenced me a lot in the type of genres and style that I write in. And let's I guess first talk a little bit about what got you interested in film and kind of leading up to where you're at now and with RoboCop and Starship Troopers and all that.
Great question. Actually, I became a writer when I was a senior in high school. I was kind of the Bill Gates nerd, president of Scholarship Club, president of History Club. Um, Terrible with the girls. And uh, I wrote a short story, which my English teacher uh, wanted me to read in front of everyone. And I felt uncomfortable doing it. So he read it. And I looked around the room and a lot of people were crying. And I realized at that moment, I think I was 16. And it was at that point that I realized the power of words. And I moved away from a pre-med career, which my father had been encouraging me because he was a pathologist. And when I went to undergraduate work, I started studying English. I took a class in Russian. Then I found myself at a UC campus um, studying Russian and English. And I started writing poetry. I hung out with Charles Bukowski when he came to the campus, did some public readings, got involved in theater. And then with a couple of other classmates, we started a film society. And I was one of the projectionists. And this was at a very wonderful moment in the history of film in America, because Janus Films had just started importing 16 millimeter prints of the European New Wave, Truffaut, Fellini, Bergman, Antonioni. And so I was exposed to all of these wonderful uh, European narratives that were moving outside the box. And um, then as a fifth year senior, I made a short film um, that I showed to the art school, and I was hooked by then. Moved back to Los Angeles after a little bit of traveling, went to a junior college there only to use the film equipment, made a half-hour film that was very crazy, um, influenced by um, hallucinogens and uh, metaphysical groups that I was meeting with. And that got me into UCLA Film School, where I was I had a lot of fun and made a lot of films. My 4 years there, I directed 3 award-winning shorts, shot 5 half-hour stories, started shooting music videos, and that led me eventually into a career being a director, cameraman of a number of heavy metal music videos. And at that point, Ed, who was an executive at Universal, saw my short film. He had been to UCLA only for a year. Uh, we had lunch and realized we had similar ideas. He had an idea called Robocop that was rattling around in his head, and I had an idea called Super Cop. And um, from that point in 1983, late 1983, August or September, we started writing Robocop. And in 3 months, we finished a spec script that fortunately landed in the hands of John Davison after several major studios passed. And he took it right to his friend Barbara Boyle in early 1984. And we had a deal. It landed at exactly the right place at the right time. Yeah. So, I mean, there was four or five pieces of good luck already in the journey of the script. And one of the big pieces was Orion because they had just finished Platoon, or they were finishing it and getting ready to make a lot of money and won a lot of awards. Orion was run by, among other people, Mike Medavoy, who was a real sort of independent gunslinger, but he had, a lot of money in the bank. And John Davison's colleague from the Roger Corman New Line days, Barbara Boyle, was a senior VP there. And they had just finished making a film with Paul called Blood and something. It was very scatological, European.
That's what is it? It's not Blood and Chocolate. Flesh and Blood.
Flesh and Blood, yeah.
Yeah.
About the plague, about it was very
Rut-
scatological in many, many
Rutger
ways. And
Hauer and
I, in fact, had was the first one, even though John and Ed's memory is a little hazy about this, who had suggested Paul because he had won an Academy Award for A Soldier of Orange. And in that film, the nastiness, both personal and political, seemed to be a really good fit with um, Robocop. And I've always felt that African Americans and Europeans handle violence much better than Americans do. And I include Tarantino and Rodriguez in this because Paul was in Europe at the end of World War II, witnessed a lot of violence firsthand, and African American filmmakers also witnessed a lot more violence firsthand than their white counterparts. So this group of Europeans and African Americans understand the consequences of violence. So the violence is abrupt, nasty, and there are consequences. So Paul, and this is the way Paul approached RoboCop. It was he shot. I think it's the best thing he ever directed. We developed the script then, and I'm sorry if I'm covering a lot of things that Ed already covered.
No. Please do.
So that first draft captured Paul. I mean, after we interviewed Curtis Hanson and George Cosmatos, and thank God they both passed. And Paul's wife Martine fished the script out of the trash after Paul had thrown it there and read it and said, "You should look at this again because it has some major themes that you're concerned with." Then Paul came on board and we did a third draft. No. We captured him with the third draft. The fourth draft, supervised by Paul, had Murphy as a bachelor, sleeping around, typical sort of Verhoeven European fare. And I said, E.T. is E.T. for a reason because it threatens home. You should put the family back in. And much to his credit, Paul, among other changes, realized that he was taking it in the wrong direction. And we put the family back in. And that fifth draft was the one that was photographed in '86. And Ed was on the set more than I was. I was supposed to direct the second unit, but I suddenly landed a job directing a low budget feature. So I signed off on the second unit, thank God, because that would have been like watching paint dry. But I was in Dallas for 2 weeks. I watched the gas station blow up. Only one small loss there. I had spent a long time trying to get the image of a gas station in several other scripts with the word shell. And during the explosion, the S was blown off. So you had flames and hell. And Davison and the production team cleared the name Shell Motor Company instead of Oil Company, built this big thing. And Paul even shot it, but didn't put it in the movie. So that was, but that's a minor quibble compared with, all. So if that's the thing you lose, imagine how much we had an embarrassment of riches, right?
Right, right.
And the film was edited on an upright moviola by Frank Uriosti, um, which is a wonderfully primitive uh, machine, all pre-digital. All of the effects were pre-digital matte paintings, and if you look at the film, you can see the clarity of the special effects. Which John Davison, much to his credit, being an old Corman alumnus like Jim Cameron, he knew how to make a dollar look like a dollar and a half. So, sixth and seventh pieces of luck. We just kept riding this wave of fortunate things, um, including Rob Bottin, and which I think was Ed's idea. Ed had, as a co-producer, had a lot of influence on how the team came together, and so much to his credit, he was sort of helping to steer the ship. And Paul, I mean, my God, English was his second language, so he worshipped the script. He always asked us, well, what does this joke mean? What does that joke mean? I think an American director would have changed things, might have brought in his or her own screenwriter for their pass, but Paul worshipped the script. And again, his take on violence is very upfront and blunt. Uh, uh, and so that combined with the zeitgeist, I always felt that the film was comic relief for a cynical decade. And where Ed really knew a lot more about the sort of Judge Dredd future graphic novel world we were going into, I was very much the far left anarchist politico, because I was an old hippie. I protested the Vietnam War, uh, and so many of the nasty, much of the nasty political commentary, I was able to contribute. And thank God, uh, Batman without the politics is just Batman. And
Right.
I think that helped to elevate RoboCop in a lot of ways. It was just a tremendous experience in so many ways. So it was a really good day at the office.
Excellent stuff. I talked a little bit about this with Ed. The fact that I'm in my senior year here in Pittsburgh at Point Park University as a screenwriting major, there were several scripts that even before I started at Point Park, there was just I had some favorite films that I said to myself, I really just need to read these scripts. And the first couple were definitely Predator, RoboCop, and several other, very like the Terminator was one, Terminator two, but it's interesting when you read the script versus what you actually see on the screen, because and I also talked about this with Ed a little bit. One of the classes I'm taking right now is story analysis, which is basically teaching me to be a script reader. And
Right.
I guess I'm kind of like already ahead of the game because I've read God knows how many scripts that are my favorite, some of my favorite films, before even starting my schooling with screenwriting.
Good
But
for you.
thank you. And one of the things I did talk a little bit about with Ed was the fact of the political um, message undertone going through RoboCop. I talked with Ed about the inserts with media, and he kind of explained um, the backstory behind that. But it's very interesting hearing the now, if you will, the backstory behind the political aspect of RoboCop, because both of those aspects really really attracted me to watching the film after my first viewing, and has since viewed it, God knows how many times, well over 500. Um,
Wow, that's impressive. The I saw the film during its first rollout in a duplex in Times Square with largely an African American audience. And if you have watched films with that crowd, they are extremely vocal. They talk to the screen, and the irony was that when you step out of the theater after seeing it, you're looking up at the high rise where the Ed 209 malfunction happened, and for a brief moment, the audience could sort of touch the violence that was being the retribution that was ironically being played out against the corporate wizards who they would never meet. So
right,
when we take them into the boardroom, it's all, even at the beginning, it's a very subversive kind of gesture to kill one of the executives, um, and then they make the classic mistake of creating a Frankenstein who comes back and bites them in the ass, a lot like Trump is now with the Republican Party.
right, right.
They seem to spawn their own enemies in a strange way. Um, but yeah, that part, having the podium even for just a moment with things like Nukem and the 6000 SUX, because we just lived through the oil crisis, and
Right.
Reagan had been president, so I was witnessing the giveaway and the deregulation of American assets. I mean, and the most informative work there for all of your listeners is a book by Naomi Klein, Klein, called "The Shock Doctrine," and it's an alternate reading of history that is hand in glove with Robocop in terms of uh, the Chicago School of Economics, who, along with the CIA, pretty much messed with every major political event globally and in New Orleans. Here you could see a lot of. I don't want to diverge too much from the film, but I mean the fact that RoboCop was made and has such strong existential and political overtones. It was, as Ed famously has said, it was made while no one was looking. We really got away with something there.
That's the truth, because one thing I also talked about with Ed is how crazy accurate RoboCop's predictions were for where we're at now and continuing to head.
Yeah.
So that's another thing I really loved about RoboCop. And I was born in '88, so a year after RoboCop. And I also want to talk. I talked a little bit about this with Ed, but Paul Verhoeven. Um, when my very first memory, like, that I can remember from the youngest age, is being in a movie theater that was right down the street from me and is no longer there, but it was being in theaters at age 3, watching Back to the Future Part 3. And like, if that doesn't say at all that I was meant to work in film, I don't know what does. But because of that, I had my favorite films growing up, and I broke Who Framed Roger Rabbit in the VCR. But also Not Before Naming My Sister after Jessica Rabbit. Um, and one of the films my dad had on VHS was Total Recall.
Well, yeah.
And at age 3, I was conscious enough to know who Arnold Schwarzenegger was, because, and I'm still a huge Schwarzenegger fan to this day. But one of the things that I said to my dad at age 3 was, "Dad, can I watch Total Recall?" And he was like, "Absolutely not." Flash forward to my fourth birthday. I said, Dad, can I watch Total Recall? He said, absolutely not. Flash forward to my fifth birthday. I said, Dad, come on now. How bad is this movie? It's Schwarzenegger. I want to watch it. And he's like, all right, it's your fifth birthday. What the hell? So I watched the entire movie on VHS minus the three-titted lady because my dad was like, you can watch all this gore and violence at age 5, but no nudity. Um, and it changed my life. That movie to this day is that and Predator. I would say are probably my two absolute favorite Arnold Schwarzenegger movies. But it also introduced me to Paul Verhoeven, and that then made me go back and watch RoboCop, and I got to check out Starship Troopers actually in theaters with my dad, and got to check out Hollow Man in theaters. I will admit I did check out Basic Instinct when I was in middle school, but my dad was aware enough to say, you're not watching Showgirls until at least you're in high school.
Well, yeah, Showgirls is a whole other
Yeah.
that sort of jumps the shark in some pretty
Right.
strange ways. um, yeah, I can imagine Showgirls being made by a gay clothing designer like Itzhak Mizrahi in
Right.
black and white and being kind of interesting. But the way it was made, it was sort of like a trip to a German gynecologist. It was very strange.
Well, it's also interesting, with the times, I'm saying that with like the 2000s into the 2010s, because we're seeing a lot of remakes and reboots, and while some of them are actually pretty decent, I'm sorry to say, a lot of them are not the greatest. I'm not going to name names there, but I will say RoboCop was one of the good ones.
Oh yeah,
um,
no, there's a lot of junk food. There's a lot of sort of cinematic diabetes out there. Um, Lots of calories, no nutrients. It's unfortunate, but it's a pipeline that needs fresh meat. And in that sense, you kind of can't get a lot of good product when all you need is product. Um, that's unfortunate. I mean, there are good recent good films have been made, and
oh, absolutely. You know, I mean, Inception was one of probably my favorite films to come out in the 2010s so far. And in terms of writing, directing, visually, and storytelling, Christopher Nolan, I think, is definitely one of the great ones out there right now.
it's true.
I was a huge, I am a huge fan of George Miller and, of course, the original Mad Max trilogy. But I have to admit, I was really, really impressed with Mad Max Fury Road. Not just with the writing, but the visual aspects, the storytelling, just, you know, everything involved with it. Um, but I like to think that I'm currently working on. I've written several feature length scripts, a few shorts. I'm working on a cartoon series right now. But one of the things that I really really like a lot, and I think where my writing expertise shines is definitely horror sci-fi, and a lot of that is due to growing up with yours and Ed's work on RoboCop and Starship Troopers, and Cameron's work on his various films with the Terminator and Aliens, and of course Ridley Scott and so many other people. But it's helped get me to where I am now to be able to write in the style that I write in.
Yeah, it's. I think that the just starting out, probably the best thing you could do is to make friends with other filmmakers and to make some low budget stuff. You know that is um, because at that level, publishing on YouTube or at the festivals, you could make a feature for as a credit card movie. You get an American Express card, you get the script in good shape, uh, and with $100,000 limit, you jam your pre-production and production on that, spend the whole 100 grand, and then declare bankruptcy, and all you got to do is kickstart your post. Um, but that way you could get a very interesting subversive film out without having all the gatekeepers telling you what not to do.
That's excellent advice, and that was actually going to lead into my next question, which was for my listeners and future filmmakers, whether it be screenwriters, directors, or any aspect of the film industry. What would be the best advice to give to a person like myself or my listeners to take the next step to kind of get them, the ball rolling to get into the industry.
Right. No, that's always the challenge. I teach screenwriting at the University of California, Santa Barbara to undergraduates and mentor scripts up at Simon Fraser University in Vancouver. And they're all people who are starting out, really talented, amazing writers. And I would just, have a little bit of advice. One, uh, don't expect your script to come out of your processor fully formed. Writing is rewriting. And so you get a first draft that has got all of the things that you think should be in there after a lot of outlining and discussing it with colleagues. I mean, really, really heavily outlining, making sure all the beats are right, and get your first draft. And that's not going to be RoboCop or Unforgiven or Inception. All of those scripts went through 10 very grinding drafts to get to that polished state. Now, that said, even though you do all that work and you may succeed in having a good screenplay, you still have gatekeepers who will either like or not like it. Will unless you like Christopher McQuarrie with The Usual Suspects, his first script won an Academy Award, but that really is the exception. So, I mean, you can go that route where you then go to the gatekeepers and try to get it through that maze. And the other route is either a short, the way the director of District 9 got that gig through a very polished short that he published on YouTube with a lot of special effects, or you do the same thing that you did with the industry script, a lot of outlining, uh, getting a first draft, showing that to a bunch of people, rewriting it 5 times, 10 times, whatever it takes, as a low budget feature like Pi, like uh, uh, something something that you can control, uh, and then you do it as a credit card movie. But the most important aspect after the script is acting. So whoever directs it, you have to try to get SAG actors because a bad performance can kill you, even in a big film like uh, the Striptease. Demi Moore was the only one who didn't know she was in a comedy. So casting after the screenplay is probably the single most important live or die moment. So you have to spend a lot of time with that because once you have actors there, they're doing their job, and the right actor will do a great job. And probably Rain Man could direct it if you have a great actor. Um, so, I mean, those are things, especially when you're struggling to get discovered and get into the film festival or successful YouTube circuit, that a plus a feature will give you the scope and reach to make some very grand statements, even if it's My Dinner with Andre. which is that kind of film, a one location story, or even Wait Until Dark, about the blind woman who's being scammed by some uh, grifters. That's a one location story, which you can do with a red or a Canon 5.3, these full frame things. Uh, that's all within your listeners' reach, just starting out.
Excellent, excellent. I mean, I know my listeners are gonna love that, and I actually am gonna, as soon as we're we're done with the interview here, which is it's no rush. But I'm gonna let my cinematographer friend know that, because he's actually the cameraman for the Fishbowl, my podcast. But unfortunately, for him, fortunately, for me, unfortunately, in layman's terms, he sold his soul to Production 3 this semester, so he has no life. Um,
Well, he'll get better. I shot a bunch of projects at UCLA on film, and it only made me better in all aspects in terms of editing, trying to make uh, use you put three shots into one. Many directors feel that the less cuts in their films, the better. Uh, if you look at the What Lies Beneath, the Zemeckis film, very long takes, keeping you in the moment. And Birdman, which I
that's
think is 30 shots or something like that.
something
So
like that.
I mean, that's okay. I think your cameraman's in a good place. Just practice, practice, practice.
Oh, absolutely. He shines in that aspect that he's chosen as a profession in the film industry to study, and he's great with the camera. You know he he's a great guy, nice guy. Generally good dude. Um, he knows what he's doing. So I wish all the best of luck to him this semester, because it's sure, as you know, it's hell.
It's tough.
Yeah, but I know that he'll prevail, just like I'll prevail with graduating in May. So um, that it comes with a territory of choosing whatever you choose as a profession to study it, when doing something with the film industry. But and that's something I also just love so much too, because movies is my thing. I love all aspects of the film industry. Growing up in the '80s, well, late '80s into the '90s, but growing up on all the '80s stuff, I have a huge appreciation for practical slash makeup effects. So, we were talking about Rob Bottin earlier and how he was such a major part of bringing Robocop to life.
Oh yeah,
And, I've been a huge fan of his work probably since I saw John Carpenter's The Thing.
yeah.
And, has since gone on to follow, the K&B Effects Group, um, of course, Pittsburgh's very own Tom Savini, Rick Baker, of course, the late great Stan Winston. There's just something about makeup effects that I don't think there's enough of it going on these days. I think that with a lot of films, specifically sci-fi and horror, I feel like we've kind of taken the easy way out and have replaced a lot of awesome, practical makeup effects with CG effects. And don't get me wrong, you could not do what they did with the new RoboCop, with Alex Murphy's character, with the original. And I'm not saying that makes it better or anything, because I'm actually saying that I think the original RoboCop and the RoboCop series is by far the better one. But still, the new RoboCop was really, really well done.
Oh yeah,
Um,
my feeling is, and Ed and I had a kind of a disagreement on this. I like the new one, and I feel that all of the people who didn't like the new one were the ones who saw the original, and the people who didn't see the original, all the people in China loved the new one, and specifically when that horror moment when they take his body, when Gary Oldman takes his body away so that he can see what he is, and he's just
like a
uh,
lung and a heart and like the spine and the head or whatever.
that's an incredible moment. I mean, that's a
Yeah,
great horror moment in that, and I think that film stands on that scene alone.
absolutely. And another thing that Ed and me actually talked about regarding the new one was how they took what you and Ed kind of wrote into the original RoboCop with where we were heading as far as like a possible future, and since that possible future has really become more true today than it was back in 1987. The new RoboCop took what you guys started and took it to like the next level based on where we're at now.
No
And
question. And Jose, who I know a little bit, is you know has a third world understanding as a Marxist of where international corporate corruption lands, and both on an existential and a socioeconomic level. Is and like Verhoeven, Jose is not a stylist. He wants to get the story. There's, and with something as complicated as RoboCop, you don't need a stylist to change the color of the film or uh, have funny angles. I would even say that someone like Fincher, as visual as he is not a stylist. He just gets the story, and that allows him to get more complex stories. Um, so
yeah, absolutely. And Fincher is also one of my favorite directors out there right now. I of course grew up with his first film, Alien 3, which a lot of people give that movie a bad rep. And to be perfectly honest, I love all of the Alien movies. Um, Aliens is probably the best out of all of them,
yeah,
but I will admit I think that the way the quadrilogy goes is that the first Alien, written by Dan O'Bannon, another one of my favorite screenwriter and also directors, made it basically a haunted house movie in space, and it was a horror sci-fi film. Aliens, which Cameron wrote and directed, was definitely a straight sci-fi action movie. What I think Fincher did with Alien 3 was that he made it back to what the first Alien was, which was a horror sci-fi movie, only makeup effects had, you know, gotten a lot more advanced, and he was therefore able to do, with the help of Tom Woodruff Jr. and David Woodruff, um, make it that much more violent and graphic that the first Alien movie couldn't do. And then Alien Resurrection, which also a lot of people give a bad rap, which I think is still a great movie, is which is written by an up and coming Joss Whedon, um, who again is another one of my favorite screenwriter slash directors. Um, took what was supposed to be a dead series, and in my opinion, did something actually pretty genius, which was introduce like a whole new concept that made Alien Resurrection, like a combination of what the first, three were, which was a horror sci-fi action movie. And I love the Alien and Predator movies, and I think I'm excited to see what they're gonna do next with that series. But let's get back to RoboCop here. Um, what would you say would be probably your biggest inspiration as far as growing up on film that kind of guided you to be able to write or to help write RoboCop?
Well, I think in terms of just film or filmmaking, again, it was the European New Wave, which included Bergman and Fellini and Truffaut, because they sort of helped me understand uh, the possibility of what you can do, which was being underestimated by Hollywood. Um, so ideas like surrealism and uh, uh, what is an existential crisis in the main character, uh, all of those things were emphasized more in the European New Wave um, than in the Hollywood films that were being made at the time. Until, of course, you had the independents in the late '60s and early '70s, and then you're off to the races because those same filmmakers discovered what I discovered. That people like Coppola and Scorsese uh, uh, and really pay homage to this this sort of expansion of the grammar uh, of what you can do with film. So I would have to say that really got me started in thinking in a different way about filmmaking. Um, the I think that people like Nicholas Roeg and some other English filmmakers also, uh, with Don't Look Now, and then the social realism of certain English filmmakers, also made me aware of the power of film and what film can do and what it can say beyond just being an entertainment. Uh, um, the Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner, these social realism coming out of England. Uh, Lindsay Anderson's "Oh Lucky Man." It was really a terrific influence, very scathingly political. If you haven't seen it, or if your listeners haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. With Malcolm McDowell, "Oh Lucky Man" by Lindsay Anderson. He made "If," which was a remake of a "Zero for Conduct" by a French a filmmaker. Um,
If is one of my favorite Malcolm McDowell movies because that film kind of allowed him to get in with Kubrick to do Clockwork.
yeah, yeah. Well, if you haven't seen "Oh Lucky Man," same director, same actor, uh, an amazing political, a masterpiece politically in terms of filmmaking. It touches. It's in 5 acts. It touches on so many aspects of geopolitics. You should definitely check it out.
I'm definitely going to. And for my listeners out there, you heard it from Michael Miner himself. Check it out. What would you say, or I should say, who would you say are some of your favorite newcomer filmmakers that are out right now?
Well, I don't know if they're newcomers, but now because they've made a lot of films, but Black Swan, the Aronofsky project was just phenomenal to me. Found I was tense from the beginning to end. I found that the horror was gothic and very well executed. Obviously, Birdman was an instant classic for me, and those two stand out. In terms of younger filmmakers, oh, I don't know. I don't know. I'm gonna um, uh, refrain from passing judgment until they make a couple more films.
Fair enough. And we'll continue that question with the next interview. um,
Okay,
that way it'll give you some time to think on that question a little bit, and and we can get back to that one.
okay.
um, what would you say are some of like your favorite films, whether it be growing up or that you've seen as an adult or even now?
Well, I mean, moving through each genre, obviously, Unforgiven was a masterpiece and it took Clint Eastwood a long time to simplify things in his own mind. And a David Peoples script, Eastwood's directing and performance. I mean, clearly a postmodern Western masterpiece. I think that Saving Private Ryan to me was also a pretty remarkable film when you think about the war movie as a genre or a subgenre. Um, I thought that was a pretty remarkable journey, in all aspects, from cinematography to performance to the screenplay. Um, I thought that the Polanski film, The Pianist, uh, was a masterpiece as well. Uh, and the style goes back to Bresson. I think there's one crane shot and two dolly moves in The Pianist. It's all actors and long takes and the situation. And you know, very impactful because of those long takes. If you look at Bresson's work, Pickpocket and Diary of a Country Priest, the same kind of spare long takes. Up on the opposite end of the spectrum, Moulin Rouge, uh, just in understanding the process by which it was made, heavy rehearsing, simultaneously rewriting the script for 5 or 6 months, funded by the government, uh, along with private investors, to get these sequences absolutely right in their final state. Uh, was it? I thought it was a cinematic masterpiece of fast cutting and dance and song together. I mean, it's to me, the bar was raised very high. And I have to go back to it's going to seem old school now, but Natural Born Killers. Ed and I wrote a script for Oliver, and he shared a little bit of his process using giving three editors the same footage and letting each of them cut to get things together, and then he shuffles those three cuts into a fourth cut. I felt when I saw the film that I'd seen a film that was taken from a projection booth from the next century. And my wife was out of town, and by the time she got back, it was only in the ghetto theaters. And so we went over to an African American community, and I watched it again. 10 days after I'd seen it before, just because of how brazen the editing and style was, and the grammar was being pushed further and further by Oliver. So that's another one to me that I consider a masterpiece. Um,
It's interesting you bring up Natural Born Killers, because first of all, Oliver Stone is one of my favorite writer and directors, and going back to what I was saying earlier with having to read the scripts that you really love. I had, as I got older and I could really understand the concept of natural born killers. Besides the fact that they're a mass murdering couple, but the real message behind what was going on there. It was political. It was media. So many different aspects going on there.
Yeah.
But the script, I had read that the actual script had gone through like a ton of rewrites before the Motion Picture Association was even going to allow it to be made, and after I saw that movie, and could understand it for what it was, and going into a screenwriting field, uh, Natural Born Killers was probably one of the first scripts as a going into a screenwriting field that I said, this is something that I not only need to read, this is something that I need to learn from.
Right.
And I have. And Natural Born Killers, I would say, is probably my number one favorite Oliver Stone movie, for the script, for the directing, for the storytelling, for the visual aspect, for the editing. It really is just a masterpiece.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Guess we could go for probably about another 10 minutes here, and then I think we're good for the first interview. Do you have any upcoming projects that you can talk about?
I'm trying to do a couple of things. And I have a couple of scripts out there. One is Die Hard in a Crematorium called Escape from Hell, in which a discredited special forces guy who gets blamed for the bad work of contractors in Afghanistan is sentenced to life in Leavenworth. And he uses a chemical in his special forces kit that mimics death, fakes his own death, and gets shipped to a crematorium, only to realize that they're in the body parts business. And so then it becomes the contractors who discredited him realize he's still alive, and they show up, and it all takes place on New Year's Eve, and it's just this wild ass shootout. Um, uh, and I just finished a thriller about reincarnation that we're just testing on a few people to see how that goes, because it's I think it's good, but it could be terrible for all I know. And there's that. There's there are a few others that are a little bit in too early a stage for me to really talk about extensively. But I'm still swinging for the fences.
Excellent, excellent. Um, if you could give, one piece of advice to my listeners that are trying to get into the industry, being whatever aspect it may be, what would you say would be the probably the absolute best piece of advice you could give them?
Um, I'll have it'll have to be two.
Okay, okay.
One, when you hit the print button, don't think you're finished, because the we're too much of a result oriented society, and too much obsessed with product. So when you watch the Olympics, just realize that all of those runners were out in empty stadiums practicing the day before, when the cameras weren't on. So I think you should treat writing the same way. There's screenwriting is a lot of thinking and a little bit of writing. So if you're just writing and writing and writing and it's not making any sense, you need to stop, because you may be lost. You need to think a lot about the story before you start writing, because realistically, you could write a screenplay in anywhere from 3 weeks to 3 months, but thinking about it and getting everything in the right place, and I include outlining in that, takes more time.
Excellent, and that's so true. I we're not told that enough by our screenwriting teachers at Point Park. They do is reiterate and reiterate that, and it's the truth. I mean, I last spring semester I took a class called Advanced Screenwriting, and in that class, we wrote a feature length script that was supposed to be between 90 and 120 pages, and it had to be done in a semester. And if it weren't for intermediate screenwriting, which I took the semester before, where we wrote a short and had a chance to write an outline that we had the option to take into advanced. If I didn't write that outline, I don't know if I would have done, as good in that class as I did.
Yeah,
Um, but again, talking about, Eastwood, another one of my, inspirations, which allowed me to write a post-apocalyptic Western. So with the combination of, just think of it as like a combination of the good, the bad, and the ugly, and Mad Max.
right,
But it goes again to just say, I'm nowhere near happy with the way that script turned out, because we only got to do a first draft of it. But now that it is written and it is a feature, I've had all these ideas to go back and fix things and change things that would make it more true to that genre.
right,
And that just goes back to say again, you can't just write, especially with a feature, one draft and be happy with it,
no,
because you're not going to be, and it's not even going to be anywhere near market ready. So that's very, very true, and I also want to reiterate that to my listeners. This is Sam Fish saying, for all you up and coming screenwriters out there, write, rewrite, write, and rewrite.
exactly. All right.
Awesome. Well, we are just about at an hour here. I'd like to just say thanks again, Mike, for coming on the show. I'm
Thanks.
thinking
Thanks.
maybe. Oh yeah, absolutely. Sorry.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. What I'm thinking is, since we pretty much only talked about RoboCop here in pretty much an hour, I was thinking maybe the next interview we do will be talking with you and Ed, about mainly, I guess, Starship Troopers and where that had gone, and then maybe we'll do another interview after that with the two of you.
Okay.
All right. Awesome.
Hey, great, Sam. Listen, keep up the good work, and I'll talk to you in a bit. Happy fall.
Thank you. Thank you again, and same to you.